Remember when a horror sequel looked at one monster stalking a dark hallway and decided the scarier version was a full-blown war on a colonized moon fought by people who were sure they'd already won it? Well, that was Aliens. Fox released it in the summer of 1986, 7 years after the original Alien locked one crew in a corridor with a single creature, and the sequel's answer to that was more Marines, more guns, and a lot more monsters. Sigourney Weaver plays Ripley, the only person on this mission who already knows exactly how bad it can get and climbs on the dropship anyway. Michael Biehn is Hicks, a corporal who keeps his squad alive long after the mission falls apart. Bill Paxton is Hudson, loudest Marine on the ship, right up until the shooting starts. Rounding them out was Jeanette Goldstein as Vasquez, the platoon's toughest grunt, Paul Reiser as Burke, the company man with his own agenda, and Lance Henriksen as Bishop, the synthetic nobody quite trusts. Today, we are counting down 15 weird facts you didn't know about aliens. And stick around for number 1, a detail that's been sitting inside this movie's own sound design for 40 years and almost nobody's checked it. Now, before we begin, hit that like button and subscribe. Hudson would complain about it. He'd do it anyway. Alright, let's stop talking and nuke these facts from orbit with number 15. She thought aliens meant something else. Jeanette Goldstein heard Cameron was casting something called Aliens and assumed it was a gritty drama about imagination, so she showed up to audition for a hardened space marine in a short skirt and heels. Cameron cast her anyway. He needed someone who could physically read as a colonial marine, and she could. Then the writers heard how she'd landed at the audition and handed Hudson a new line. Vasquez only signed up because she heard aliens and thought they said illegal aliens. Her actual mistake, written straight into the movie. Turning her into Vasquez took an hour a day in the makeup chair. Contacts, darkened skin, a built-from-scratch accent, enough that Cameron has since admitted the casting would land differently now. The performance outlasted the debate. Goldstein became a Cameron regular, turning up again in T2 and Titanic off the back of a woman who walked into the wrong audition in the wrong outfit. Number 14, the audition Bill Paxton thought he failed. By Gale and Hurd's account, Cameron built Hudson for one actor, Bill Paxton, a friend going back to their Roger Corman days. The catch was the studio had no idea who that was. Paxton's biggest credit was the older brother in Weird Science, not the real that screams Colonial Marine, so he still had to audition. He read for Cameron at Pinewood while visiting his girlfriend in London, walked out sure he'd overplayed it, and flew home to silence. Then Weird Science opened and the good notices started rolling in. Cameron floated his name overseas. The head of casting knew exactly which reviews he meant, and the pick got backed on the spot. The director wanted him from day one, and it still came down to a comedy opening at exactly the right moment. The real worry came later. Hudson talks the biggest game in the room and falls apart the fastest once the shooting starts, and Paxton was convinced audiences would spend the whole movie waiting for him to get killed. He had it backwards. Hudson cracking on cue was the release valve. He said out loud what everyone watching was already feeling. The way Paxton saw it later, for every Ripley or Hicks, there are a million Hudsons. Number 13, he shot the wrong set, then lost the movie. James Remar was Corporal Hicks. Walter Hill, who directed him a few times, helped him land the audition, and he showed up to Pinewood ready to go. Even painted his own chest armor with a heart and a padlock right over where his real one sat underneath. Then, he shot the wrong movie. Literally. Remar fired a weapon somehow loaded with live rounds through a soundstage wall and into Frank Oz's Little Shop of Horrors set next door. Nobody was hurt, but nobody was really thrilled either. That wasn't even what got him fired, though. About 2 weeks in, Remar was arrested in London for drug possession, a habit he's talked about openly since. The official line was creative differences. The truth was serious enough that producers pushed to have him deported rather than let it play out in a British court, which, by Gale and Hurd's account, spared him something like 8 to 10 years in an English prison. And it cost him more than the part. Hill, the man who'd vouched for him, didn't hire him again for 12 years. Biehn got the call on a Friday night, Hurd on the line asking one thing: was his passport current? He said yes, flew over, and was on set Monday. No boot camp, no rehearsal. He also inherited Remar's armor exactly as it was and hated it, saying the padlock heart made him look like he had a bullseye on his chest. The weird kicker? Remar never fully left the movie. There's one wide shot in the alien nest, a figure filmed from behind, and if you look close enough, you'd never guess the guy walking away from the camera had been fired weeks earlier. Number 12, the safe glass that really wasn't. To rescue Newt, Ripley had to tear the kid out of the alien nest bare-handed, ripping through a wall of prop glass Cameron promised was the harmless kind. Weaver touched it first, decided it looked plenty sharp, and told him she wasn't so sure. Cameron didn't argue. He grabbed the nest and shredded it with his own hands. No cuts, no problem. So she went in and did it exactly as written. Ran in, grabbed Newt, ran out. Then she looked down and her hands were covered in blood. Her explanation for the difference? She just wasn't as tough as her director. She tells it as a warm story, which tracks. They've been making movies together ever since, right through the Avatar films. The lasting takeaway? Anytime a director swears something's perfectly safe, she assumes it's quite the opposite. Number 11, built to avoid Star Wars, designed by Star Wars. Cameron built the power loader twice, and the second version only exists because he didn't want it to look like he was cribbing from Star Wars. Ripley's cargo rig, the one she straps into for the final round with the Queen, started out on 4 legs. Then, Empire Strikes Back arrived in 1980 with its AT-AT walkers, and Cameron scrapped the whole idea rather than invite the comparison. The 4-legged version survives now only as a paragraph in the novelization. Nobody ever built it. For the look of the 2-legged replacement, he consulted Sid Mead, the visual futurist known for Blade Runner and Tron. Small problem, Mead's old industrial walking machine artwork was part of what inspired the AT-ATs in the first place. Cameron ran from Star Wars straight into the guy who'd helped shape it. Mead sketched some concepts, but the design that actually made the movie was Cameron's own. Building it was a nightmare. The first prototype was pipes and foam thrown together in a single day. Enough for the English crew to realize, with dread, that he was actually going to make them do this. The finished rig weighed in around 600 pounds and was so front heavy, it face planted over and over in rehearsal. Nobody could wear it, so stuntman John Lees ran the whole thing from inside, hidden right behind Weaver working the legs while she rode along on top. Cameron's own description was the old trick where a dad lets his kid stand on his feet to walk. Number 10, the alien's own father missed the sequel. H.R. Giger, the man who designed the most influential movie monster ever put on screen, didn't touch a single creature in Aliens. Nobody on the production even called him. He was in Los Angeles at the time, working on Poltergeist 2, and only learned the sequel was happening once it was already rolling in England. It stung. He said later that a second Alien was the one job he'd have jumped at, that he asked around everywhere and that nobody would tell him a thing. His own theory was that the Poltergeist people kept him in the dark so they wouldn't lose him to the bigger movie. Cameron's own reason was simpler. In an apologetic letter to Giger's agent, he admitted he wanted more control over his version, and while Hurd was pointed to Giger's Poltergeist contract, Cameron later conceded they could have worked around it if they really wanted him. Giger got paid for the use of his design, just not the call to help build it. So the job went to Stan Winston, fresh off the Terminator with Cameron. The Warrior stayed close to Giger's original nightmare, tweaked head and all, with performers moving like predators instead of a guy shuffling in a rubber suit. The real swing was the Queen, Cameron's own design, the one new creature carrying the risk. And the army? Mostly illusion. Winston's shop built just 12 suits and shot them to look like an entire horde. Giger did see the finished film, and for all his hurt feelings, he loved what they did with the Queen. He just would have liked to be asked. Number 9, it nearly died. Over tea. This movie almost got shut down before a single alien showed up on camera. Not over money or script, actually, it was over tea. Almost the whole thing shot at Pinewood with a fully unionized British crew and a 31-year-old director who had no feel for how a British set ran. They didn't rate him either. They loved working for Ridley Scott on the first film, and here was some unknown they nicknamed the Yank ordering them around alongside his producer wife, which several of them openly resented. Top of the friction list, the twice daily tea break locked into the schedule at 10 and 2 sharp. Gale and Hurd called them time card punchers who'd vanished the second the trolley rolled in. One time, Cameron spent an hour pumping a set full of atmospheric smoke. The giant stage doors swung open to let the tea lady through, and every bit of it drifted out before he could roll a frame. The real detonation was first assistant director Derek Cracknell, who kept overriding Cameron's setups and rebuilding shots his own way, often badly enough that whole sets had to be torn down and redone, so Cameron fired him. Cracknell talked the entire crew into drowning tools and walking off mid-shoot, no warning, and everything just stopped. Around then, the crew started wearing t-shirts that read, "You can't scare me, I work for James Cameron." Weaver, the one person both sides trusted, brokered the peace and got everyone back on the floor. Cracknell agreed to fall in line. Cameron agreed to stop treating tea breaks like sabotage. At the wrap, he told them the only thing that kept him going was knowing that one day he'd drive out the Pinewood Gate for good and they'd still all be there. For all that, Weaver says they came around, devoted by the end. Number 8, the 4-day score that became a classic. James Horner landed in London expecting a finished cut and 6 weeks to score it. Instead, he found a movie still being edited and a director shut away with the pulse rifle sound effects with no usable footage to hand him. He pushed for more time. Cameron and Gale and Hurd wouldn't move the schedule an inch, and when Horner kept pressing, Hurd threatened to replace him outright. His answer? Sure, as soon as she found someone physically capable of hitting that deadline. Nobody could. So Horner wrote almost the entire score in about 4 days, then bolted into Abbey Road to record it with the London Symphony Orchestra. The climactic cue, Bishop's Countdown, the music under Ripley's showdown with the Queen, he wrote it overnight. Then Cameron recut the finale after the fact, and Horner spent the next 36 hours frantically rewriting to match. The irony? The edit chopped most of his work to pieces, some scenes stitched from as many as 4 different cues. Bishop's Countdown was the one major piece that survived exactly as written, and it's the one that outlived everything, reused in something like 24 trailers over the years. The whole rushed, miserable job still earned Horner his first Oscar nomination. The Bad Blood? It lasted too. He and Cameron didn't work together again for about 11 years until, reportedly, he was won back by Horner's Braveheart score. Cameron brought him in for Titanic, the most famous music in Aliens written by a guy who had barely any time to sleep. Now, we're going to take a quick pause because if that motion tracker beeping still gets your pulse up even when you already know what's coming, you're safe here. Drop a comment too. Ripley or Vasquez, who's actually surviving this drop? And hey, if you have a friend who still swears they would have outlasted Hudson down there, send them this video. Hit like and subscribe as well because it's the only order on this ship that nobody's going to argue with. Now let's get back to the colony with number 7, Hollywood Accounting created Aliens. Alien cost somewhere between $9 and $11 million and pulled in more than $100 million at the box office. A hit by any honest math. Fox accountants saw it differently though. They reported the movie had actually lost the studio around $2 million. Then industry accountants started picking at the numbers in public and Fox suddenly discovered a $4 million profit after all. Brandywine Productions, the company that actually made the film, didn't buy either figure and sued over the missing money. The fight dragged on about 3 years before settling in 1983, and the settlement was the strange part. Fox agreed to put a sequel into development, not because anyone suddenly believed in it, but because letting Brandywine earn off a follow-up was cheaper than writing a check for the profits it already owed. Nobody at the studio actually wanted the thing. Co-founder David Giler blamed an incoming Fox exec, Norman Levy, who he said thought a sequel would be a disaster. Giler also told the LA Times about bumping into the studio owner's son at a bar and asking when his dad would finally make the movie. The answer being never, since not making it was going to save the old man millions. So, the most acclaimed sequel of its era, the one that landed Sigourney Weaver an Oscar nomination, exists for one deeply unglamorous reason. A studio got legally cornered and a beloved movie was the cheapest way out of the bill. Number 6, it took a small crowd to run one monster. Now, depending on the shot, it took anywhere from 8 to 16 people to bring the queen to life. She stands 14 feet tall, and 1986 offered no digital touch-ups to fall back on. She's a real physical puppet from Stan Winston's shop. 2 stunt performers were sealed inside her torso, each one working one of her big outer arms and one of the smaller inner ones. 4 arms between the 2 of them. Nobody could reach her head from in there, so it ran on its own hydraulic system. Lines were fed from the neck out to a support rig, where operators literally cranked steering wheels to swing her head around. Her face was a separate job again. Jaw, teeth, and lips all pulled by cables. None of that existed at the start. The first version was a rush job. Rubber foam and garbage bags thrown over 2 puppeteers on a crane rig, built to answer one question. Would Cameron's insane plan of hiding people inside a giant crane-hung puppet actually read on camera? Because when he first pitched folding 2 grown men inside a monster this size, Winston's honest reaction was that the man had obviously lost his mind. Then, in the next breath, he figured if Cameron could picture it, they could probably build it. They did, and the finished queen became one of the largest, most sophisticated practical creatures ever put on film. Number 5, the raise that changed Hollywood. Same actress, same role, 3 movies, about 13 years, and a paycheck that multiplied more than 100 times over. Every draft Cameron wrote kept Ripley dead center. Fox saw a budget problem. Weaver was a real star by then, off Alien and Ghostbusters, and the studio got so nervous about her price that it floated doing the sequel without her and told Cameron to write Ripley out. Cameron flatly refused. For a while, neither side moved. Fox blinked first. Weaver signed for a reported $1 million plus a cut of the profits, roughly 30 times the 30-odd grand she'd made originating the role, and a landmark payday for an actress at the time. Then her performance did something the genre almost never pulled off. It landed a Best Actress Oscar nomination. Sci-fi leads just didn't crack that category. Weaver was the one who broke it open, and it'd be about 30 years before another performance in the genre managed the same. The number only climbed from there. Weaver was unsure about coming back for Alien 3, so the studio paid to make her sure. Around $4 million and a co-producer credit. The kicker? The movie she signed on to is the one that kills Ripley off for good. Number 4, the most famous line, wasn't the improvised one. Everyone can quote both cold. Ripley's "Get away from her, you bitch," and Hudson's "It's game over, man." The natural assumption is that both came out in the heat of the moment. Pure improv. The kind of line that only lands because whoever said it meant it. That assumption is right exactly once, and it's not the line you'd bet on. Ripley's line was in the script from day one, word for word. What nobody planned for was the clock. By the time they reached that setup, the schedule was so tight that Weaver had to be rigged into the loader, operator crammed in behind her, crew heaving the elevator doors open, and nail the whole confrontation in a single shot. Her voice cracked up an octave on "you bitch," and she was sure she'd wrecked it. She asked to go again. They told her there wasn't time. That take is the one everyone quotes. Hudson's line went the other way. Cameron never wrote it. Paxton said flat out that he was not good at improvising with a camera running. His real trick was floating ideas in rehearsal and trusting Cameron's steel trap memory to pull the good ones back out weeks later. That's how Express Elevator to Hell Going Down ended up in the film. For Hudson, he'd cooked up a whole backstory. A kid who grew up on simulators and arcade games where game over is just what flashes when your quarter runs out. He tossed the line out and had no clue it would outlive everything else he said. The one that feels spontaneous was sitting in the script before day one. The one that feels scripted only exists because Paxton kept quietly auditioning ideas nobody asked him for. Number 3, yes, James Cameron really wrote Aliens. You've probably heard some version of this. Cameron strolls into a room full of suits, writes "Alien" on a board, and then tacks on an S, slashes 2 lines through it to turn the S into a $sign, and walks out with a green light and an $18 million budget. The $sign is real. Cameron's confirmed it himself more than once. The legend just tidied up the details. He wasn't at a whiteboard performing for strangers, he was sitting with the 3 producers in the office of the head of Fox, and he scrawled it out on the blank back of his own script. And by the time he drew the $, he'd already made the real pitch. The first film is one creature stalking a handful of people, and his would be aliens, plural. Ripley against a whole army. The $sign was just the punchline. His words, they went with the title and never questioned it. The swagger is even better in context because he'd been talked out of the whole thing first. A big shot producer warned him over lunch that it was a no-win. If the movie's good, Ridley gets the credit. If it's bad, it ends his career. Cameron's answer was basically, yeah, but I like it. This coming from a guy with one real hit to his name, betting on a sequel nobody was sure they wanted. And it was no instant greenlight. He'd already had a treatment. The project still had to grind through the studio's process, and it was his reputation off the Terminator that finally landed him the chair. And the film, it's $18.5 million. Number 2, lost the Marine role, won the franchise. Stephen Lang auditioned for Aliens and didn't get the part. More than 20 years later, the same director handed him the lead villain in the highest grossing movie ever made. The first time around, Lang read for Corporal Hicks and lost the role to James Remar, the same Remar who'd got himself fired off the picture soon after. At that point, Lang was a respected New York stage actor with 0 science fiction on his resume, one more name on a casting sheet for a mid-budget sequel at Pinewood. He gave a good audition, he just didn't get it. Then, Avatar happened. Cameron cast him as Colonel Miles Quaritch, and the movie became the highest grossing film in history, a title it's held on and off ever since. Lang rode Quaritch through the sequels, even returning as a blue Na'vi version of himself until the character became one of the defining faces of the whole saga. The road back ran through a newspaper ad. Casting director Marjorie Simkin spotted a photo of Lang looking every inch the hardened soldier in a promo for his one-man military play Beyond Glory and floated his name for Quaritch. Cameron didn't hesitate. A good actor who auditioned for Aliens years back nearly had it. He'd never forgotten. And Lang says Cameron later walked him through that old audition in detail, unprompted, more than 2 decades after the fact, which is why Lang calls the whole thing the world's longest callback. Millions know Stephen Lang's face from Avatar and nothing else about him. Almost none of them know he spent an afternoon in the 80s trying and failing to land a spot among the Colonial Marines. Number 1, the countdown clocks were never lying to you. Aliens does something almost no action movie bothers with. It hands you a number, then actually keeps it. It does this twice. When the dropship starts its descent, a pwn calls out a 10-second warning and the boots hit the ground right on the 10 count. Later, once the whole mission's gone sideways, that automated voice announces 15 minutes until the atmosphere processor blows. Start a stopwatch when she says it, and the explosion lands remarkably close to the 15-minute mark. Not movie 15 minutes, actual 15 minutes. That almost never happens. Most films treat a countdown as set dressing. A number slapped onto a screen that means whatever the edit needs it to mean by the time it hits 0. Aliens quietly plays it straight both times and never once points at itself for doing it. 40 years of retrospectives, and the best kept secret here isn't a deleted scene or some wild story from the shoot, it's that the numbers on screen were telling you the truth the whole time. Don't take my word for it, set a timer and see for yourself. And there you have it, 15 weird facts about aliens. Which one hits you the hardest? Drop it in the comments below, and if you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? We're not going to threaten you with a countdown clock about it, we just want you to hit that button. Now, until next time, it's game over, man. Game over. And this is Remember When.